see your faces and see that everybody is still sitting in the same places as always. Last week I had to travel to Philadelphia for a day of quiet reflection. Traditionally during Advent and Lent, brothers from this province, which is New York and New Jersey, gather in a central location to spend time together in prayer and hopefully to be inspired by several talks during a 2-day retreat. This time we gathered in Philadelphia. So before I left White Plains, I dutifully programmed my GPS to get me there. I had a general idea of the direction that I was going to go in, but I knew I would definitely need the GPS once I started to get closer to Philly. As I started out, although Susanna, that's my GPS's name, Susanna, she's a very proper English woman who uses words like motorway and roundabout. Although Susanna told me to head toward the George Washington Bridge, I instead decided to head over the Tappan Zee. Realizing that I had gone in a different direction, she quietly recalculated and then told me to take the Palisades Parkway to I-95. I chose to take the Garden State instead. Again, in her quiet English manner, she renegotiated the directions and the arrival time based on the decisions that I had made. And she was soon directing me on my new course. Suffice it to say, doing it my way had already added 15 minutes onto the trip. So finally, after 2 hours or so, I finally came to the city of brotherly love. And although the sign said Philadelphia left lane, Susanna very clearly told me to be in the right lane and to take an exit in Camden, New Jersey, which as far as I knew was nowhere near Philadelphia. So once again, rather than trust her, I followed the signs and headed off in the other direction. But this time something inside of me said, I think I've made a mistake. So I quickly exited the motorway, finding myself in a very questionable neighborhood. By now, the GPS was frantically trying to figure out what I was doing. And instead of recalculating, this time she gently but firmly began saying over and over, turn around. Turn around as soon as possible. Please turn around now. I did turn around, and from there on, I followed all of her commands without question, eventually arriving at my destination. As it turns out, I was headed into Philadelphia at 5 o'clock p.m., and the road I had taken, while the more direct route, would have brought me directly into the nightmare of city rush hour traffic. The less direct route that Susanna laid out for me ended up getting me there in half the time with far fewer traffic delays. And believe me, after 3 hours of trying to do it my way, there was no sweeter sound than hearing the words, congratulations, you have successfully arrived at your destination. So what, you might ask, does today's gospel have to do with my GPS or my driving to Philadelphia? Actually, it has a lot to do with it, but it has more to do with Lent and what we're supposed to be doing during these 40-plus days that will lead us to Easter. Every year, the church invites us to take a little trip, a journey, but not a journey to someplace out there, a journey into ourselves, a journey deep inside into those places where we'd rather not go, those places where we're afraid to go, to those dark and not so nice places that lie within every one of us. But we're not expected to do it on our own. We're provided with a map, with directions, and the best path has been laid out for us. But we continually choose alternate routes, sometimes because we think we know better, sometimes because we think we know a shortcut, and every time, just like the GPS, God patiently recalculates, redirects, gives us another chance, and another chance, and another chance, until when we are the most lost, when we find ourselves in those neighborhoods we'd rather not be in, we are gently but firmly called to turn around, to repent, to change direction, and start again. Today's gospel, and indeed the gospel of last week, and the gospel we'll hear next week, are all reminders of the unending mercy of God. Last week we heard about the fig tree that was spared for another year, given yet another chance to bear fruit. This week we hear the well-known story, the prodigal son, or the parable of the lost son, which unfortunately has been given a name that makes us focus on the son. The intent of the story is to make us focus on the Father. Jesus told this story to his listeners to show the difference between God's mercy, God's love, and God's grace, and the judgmental attitudes of the Pharisees. So when we focus on the Son, as we tend to, and we think about what an ungrateful brat he is, we miss the real point. Let's take a closer look at it for just a moment, because it's full of meaning and symbolism that unfortunately does not have the same impact on us that it would have had on Jesus' audience. There are three players in the story. First, the Father. The Father who is quiet throughout the story. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't argue or get angry. He waits patiently for things to unfold. Then there's the younger son. The son who asks for his inheritance so he can take off to live a life of partying and fun. Now this wasn't like asking for an allowance or an advance. The son wanted what would normally be his once his father was dead. But he had no intention of waiting. So basically he's saying to his father, as far as I'm concerned, you're already dead. I don't need you. Just give me your money and give it to me now. The father doesn't try to ground him or hold him back. He simply divides his property and gives the boy what is his. So now he's separated from his father. He's also rejected and dishonored himself. And he has shamed himself and basically dishonored his entire village. The place where he lives is now a place where he can never return. So as the story continues, the boy has his fun. He spends every penny of his inheritance, and he soon finds himself without money, without friends, and without a place to live. To survive, he takes a job feeding pigs. And this is very significant in the story because Jews were not allowed to touch pigs. They were unclean animals. So the point here is that the kid has hit rock bottom. He is so desperate that he takes a job which further breaks the laws and customs of his people. The third character in the story is the older son, and he represents the Pharisees. Bitterness and resentment keep him from forgiving his younger brother. And that, in turn, blinds him to the treasure that he freely enjoys by being in constant relationship with his father. So just like the older brother, the Pharisees are so self-righteous that they forget to rejoice when a sinner returns to God. Back to the father. When the youngest son does return, he doesn't wait for him to come back. He does what I think most of us would find very hard to do after being hurt so badly. He runs to him. He embraces him. He forgives him without question. And he welcomes him back with a magnificent party. This is not a story about sin. This is not about a good son and a bad son. This is a story about a father whose love is so strong and so big that it does not seek to possess. This is about a love that is willing to let go, to make no demands, a love that waits patiently, a love that forgives and welcomes one home. It's not about a love that doesn't rescue us or stop us from doing things our own way. It's about a love that puts us on the right path, or hopes that we find the right path, even if that's going to take us far away to a distant country. God's love is a love that redeems the time that's spent away. It redeems a life lived wrongly. And that is indeed good news, because all of us, no matter who we are, have traveled to that distant country at some point. And that's why we come here every week. We come here every week so our inner GPS, if you will, can be reset and redirected. Because we lose our way so easily. So today is an opportunity for each of us to think about who we are in terms of the characters in the gospel story. Whether I am the rebellious son, lost and far from God, or one who has already hit rock bottom and is ready to return but scared of the consequences, or perhaps the bitter, resentful older brother who can no longer rejoice in another person's happiness. Brothers and sisters, we are nearing the end of Lent. And once more, we are given yet another chance to listen to the directions that have been laid out for us. Now is the time to stop driving into the traps and dead ends that the world tempts us with. Now is the time to stop trying to do it our own way. Now is the time to lay aside self-righteousness and self-will and simply follow the path back to the gentle, loving, patient Father who wants nothing more than to run to us and embrace us and celebrate our return. In today's epistle, St. Paul urges us, be reconciled to God. And then in his letter to Romans, he assures us that while sin may separate us from God, nothing can separate God's love from us. If we want to be part of the great celebration, the celebration we call resurrection, then we need to get busy finding our way back home. And we need to do it God's way. One final point. They say there's a foolproof way to prove that dog is man's best friend. You may have heard this. Lock your best friend and your dog in the trunk of your car. Go back an hour later and see who's happy to see you. Here's the good news. Now, maybe it's just a coincidence that God and dog are spelled with the same letters. But here's the good news. God is always, always happy to see us. Especially after we've been away and we return. Most especially when we get lost and turn our lives around and find our way back. And just like that wonderful feeling of relief I got after hours of driving when the GPS finally said, congratulations, you have reached your destination. I know there will be no sweeter sound than hearing God's loving and merciful voice deep inside our souls saying, welcome home, my dear beloved child. I've missed you so much, welcome home. Now come to the feast that I have prepared for you.